Hey everybody, it's Grant with the next lesson of Revelation study that we were doing. Um, Now that our time in the classroom has expired, for from now on we're going to be doing these just sort of like this format, me just talking into the dead eye of my computer camera and pretending that it's a bunch of people. So that was a joke. But we're going to do this format of it's just going to basically be a video, and we'll take it probably a chapter at a time until we get to the end of Revelation. I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to do it all in classes, but Revelation is one of those books where it's just really dense and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we did not make it through in 13 weeks, unfortunately. But we are now in Revelation chapter 17. And for this one, I'm going to read through the chapter instead of stopping at each slide because we're going to be looking at as you can see as the heading on this slide, the harlot and the beast. And those are two distinct things that get described in this passage, but they don't get described one after another. It's like their descriptions are interspersed with each other. And so if we were to just go through slide by slide, it would be more confusing. So we're going to go all the way through the chapter and then talk about one and then talk about another. And maybe I'll flip back through the slides to just point out where it talks about these details. But as you can see, they're already underlined too. So here we go. This is Revelation 17, starting in verse 1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the sentence of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead had been a mysterious name, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Sorry. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the beast, or from the abyss, pardon, and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel, seeing the beast, because it was and is not and will soon be." This calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are also 7 kings, 5 of whom who fell. One is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an eighth, but it also belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they will receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. Though these are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he says to me, the angel says to John, he says to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they are the beast, or they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out this purpose and to do one purpose, and to hand over their dominion to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. That is the end of chapter 17. That's all we'll go over for today. So let's talk about it. First, let's talk about the harlot, the great prostitute, going back to verse 1. We see that she is the one who is seated on many waters. This is going to be carrying on the theme in Revelation of taking quotes from Old Testament prophets so that the reader has, if the reader is familiar with those works, has the inkling, they understand what ideas we're going for here. The one who is seated on many waters is from the book of Jeremiah, describing Babylon. Babylon, the city-state that essentially took over most of the known world in the late 600s and early 500s BC, before Christ. This is the same one that took over Judah and Jerusalem and took all of the Jews, not all the Jews, but most of them into captivity for 70 years, leaving only the poorest of the poor in their wake, and taking everyone who was worth anything back to the city of Babylon in exile. The one and the same. Babylon is used over and over in the Old Testament as the thing that represents all of the things that are wrong with a human society. The place that we first see Babylon is actually in the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. Some people don't know this, but Babel and Babylon are the same thing. It's just in one text, you don't have the ending for the word, and in the other text, you do. The later texts, like the books of Kings and Chronicles and the book of Daniel, they have the ending, we have in our language O-N, but back then it was just the letter for N, noon. And that letter was droppable. We talked about that back when we talked about the number of the beast. The letter noon was sometimes able to be dropped off a word because it was not actually a part of the core word. It was a part of the ending of the word, especially if the word is a name. So Babel and Babylon, they are the same. They just have an ending on Babylon that can be dropped. So it's first brought up in Genesis 11. Then you have in Genesis 12 the founder, progenitor of all of Israel, Abram. And where does he come from? He comes from Ur of the Chaldeans, which is also a place known as Babylon. It's in the valley of Shinar, which is that river valley between the Euphrates and the Tigris River, which is Babylon. So it's used, but he is being called out of that area and given his sort of commission by God, his special purpose, and God refines his character over the course of his time in the book of Genesis. And he becomes the pinnacle, the image, the man of faith, a hero for the Jewish people who are looking at the idea of trusting in God. So Anyway, Babylon. Anytime you hear Babylon in the Bible, it's talking about it in a negative sense. It's where people and their power structures have usurped the authority of God and are going after things that they think are right. And what it often results in is just people trying to lift themselves up and oppress others while doing it. The empire of Babylon was built off of the backs of people it took over. It's built on oppression. And of course, that also applies to Rome in the first century. And of course, in the first century, when John is writing, that is the big world spanning empire that they're dealing with at the time, Rome. And it was built on the backs of the slaves in Rome. And that was like, I'm not exactly sure what the percentage of population in Rome was slave versus free in the first century, but I know that it got so bad at one point it was like half and half, sometimes even more than half being slaves. It was definitely built on the backs of people that Rome conquered. But we're going to get more support that this great prostitute is Rome, like I just hinted at, as we go on. But this is the one with whom the all the kings of the earth committed sexual immorality here with this line right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm just kind of like dragging it across the text here. They committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. Again, in the book of Jeremiah, Babylon is portrayed as a, uh, a a woman, but not just a woman. She's like a lady, like regal, royal lady, and she is like passing around her cup of wine and just getting everyone in the world drunk. And when they go drunk, they go crazy because that's what happens when you go drunk. Um, that's how she's depicted. So again, it's bringing up these quotes that apply to Babylon in the book of Jeremiah, and they are being applied in the same ideas to Rome in the present context. And so moving on to what she is called. She is called down here at the bottom of the slide, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. So again, like I said, Babylon is used to represent all that is wrong with a human society. Here, it's even going so far as to say the source of the things that are wrong with human societies. It's sort of like it began there and it just kind of corrupted as it went. And Rome is like their time's iteration of this trope, this unfortunate corrupted trope of human society. And of course, we have at the end of our passage right there saying, the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. That, of course, could apply to many ancient empires, including Assyria with their capital Nineveh. It could apply to Babylon with their capital, Babylon, and it can apply to Rome with their capital, Rome. These were city-states that were in such advantageous positions that when they got aggressive, they took over. And they just projected their power out from their very secure position. And they were city-states that became empires. So they are cities that rule over the kings of the earth. Definitely can apply to Rome. When we see the description of the beast, like we're about to go investigate right now, we will see further reinforcement that it's Rome that we're talking about, and the devil is in the details here. But let's talk about the beast now. The scarlet beast, it's Scarlet. Scarlet is it's the same word that was used before to talk about the dragon, to talk about the second horseman's horse in the first set of seven, the seven seals sequence. And that word it means the color of fire. So it means scarlet, fiery red. I don't know if there's a whole lot of significance to that, but I do know that in the past, people have used that detail to try and say that something contemporary to them is the beast. They, in the Reformation movement, Martin Luther tried to say that the beast of Revelation is the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church, it was like they're all about red. That was one of his details. They're all about red. Anything can be about red. You know, um, one of the United States national colors is red. You're gonna say the United States is the beast as well? Like, and where does it end? How many things are going to be the beast? Any nation that has red in their flag, or any entity that has a headquarters that is colored red or something, where does that stop? And that's kind of something that I've been saying this whole time, that Revelation is not necessarily meant to map onto things contemporary to us. It was meant to map onto things contemporary to those Christians at that time that John was writing, in that region that he was writing to. That doesn't mean it doesn't have significant things to tell us, but it does mean it's not trying to supply us with, like, people expand it to mean signs of the second coming. And we can talk about that for hours, but it's not meant to do that. It's not meant to map onto our time. It was meant to map onto that time. And if we're going to pull important lessons from Revelation, we have to pull them through that. We have to pull them through that lens, because that's the lens that John gives to the book when he writes it, going all the way back to the first verse of the book. In general, it was about things that were going to soon take place, not take place 2,000 years in the future. All right. So moving on from that, let me step up off my soapbox for a little bit. Moving on from that, this red beast, it is full of blasphemous names. This word full doesn't just mean like he's filled. It's like bloated. He's bloated with blasphemous names, like they're just ready to spill out. Gross. But this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, if you are familiar with the beast in the book of Daniel, we talked about that last time that we talked about the beast. It's got the 7 heads and it's got the 10 horns. So you read this and you're like, oh, we're talking about that beast. And what was that beast from the book of Daniel? Well, if you look at the context, it's going through a list of world empires that were going to rise up in between then, and it was in order: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Alexander, and the fourth one that came after Greece was, of course, if you know your history, Rome. The text in Daniel never says Rome, but if you know your history, you know that it was Rome. That's just how it went. So we're talking about Rome here. We're talking about Rome. He says that it was and is not, and yet is about to ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to destruction. This is like, what are we even talking about anymore? It was and it's not, but it will be ascending out of the bottomless pit. I think I need to move on to the next slide for that one. There you go. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the abyss, or the bottomless pit, and go to destruction. The bottomless pit, or the abyss, in the Bible, the pit is used synonymously with death. Okay. So what does it mean that something rises out of the pit? It means that, at least in appearance, it's coming back from the dead. When we talked about the beast, I think that's in chapter 13, but I might be wrong. We explored that concept that one of the heads of the beast had the mortal wound that it was healed from. And the word for mortal wound is not just a really bad wound. It means the wound of death, or the wound that causes death. Like that head died, but came back. So at least on the appearance, it is coming back to life, and that convinces everybody to worship that beast because one of its heads came back to life. Ooh. So here we're getting the same idea. The beast that you saw was, like, it's been and is not, it's currently dead and is about to rise from the abyss. It's about to come back to life. This it might be implied that this beast is the same beast as mentioned before, and we got the name of that beast. The name, the number of its name, 666 or 616. And that name came out to Caesar Nero. That title first, Caesar Nero. So we're talking about Nero. This brings back up the Nero Redivivus myth, the Nero coming back to life, which was an urban legend that was just scared everyone because Nero was the most crazy, like not crazy, but like evil crazy emperor that Rome had up to that point. So let's talk about the emperors, because we get the seven heads. The seven heads are seven mountains, but they're also seven kings. So let's talk about the seven mountains things first. The words for mountain and the word for hill, both in Hebrew texts, in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, the Greek scriptures, the words for mountain and the word for hill are the same word. So when you see mountain and you see hill, it's the same word. It's like high place, just higher place. So in English, we have the word for hill that's like, ooh, and then we have the word for mountain, which is like, ah. It says seven mountains, but it can just the same be translated as seven hills. What is the city that is famous for being built upon seven hills? Well, it's Rome. So the woman is seated on these seven hills. Ergo, the woman is Rome, the prostitute. Like I said, another reinforcing detail from the description of the beast now. But now let's talk about the kings thing. In Rome, like Rome itself, you didn't have a king, but you did have a king. And this is what I mean. Back when Rome first began, like it got settled as a city, very quickly a man rose to power and he called himself the king. He was so bad, he was so oppressive. The people of Rome rose up, they deposed him, they killed him, and they did not ever want to be ruled by a king. That's why Rome, when it was on the rise, was famous for being a republic instead of a monarchy. They didn't want a king because they had such a bad experience with one in the past, taking all the power and going crazy with it. But then you get Augustus, who rises out of the civil war caused by Julius Caesar and his death and the schism that happened then, and he instates himself as the absolute ruler in Rome, but he doesn't call himself a king because that would get him killed. Instead, he calls himself imperator, or emperor, or commander. It's really what the word imperator means, someone who commands. But in English, we call that an emperor. So he becomes the first emperor of Rome. not being called a king, but like in effect, he is the king, but he's not calling himself the king. So when we get these 7 kings, that's who we're talking about. We're talking about the emperors of Rome. We're talking about the Caesars. But the question is, we got the 7 heads, 7 Caesars. There's a lot of Caesars. So where does our count start? That's a question. Where does our count of these 7 Caesars start? Here's a set of them. You have Nero, right? The baddest, right? Nero. Then you had Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, and then Domitian. Domitian is the emperor who was in power when John wrote the book of Revelation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But wait, isn't the 7th one not supposed to be there yet? Like the 7th is the one who's supposed to be the one about to rise from the pit. Well, also he says 5 of whom fell, and 1 is, and the other has not yet come. So isn't the 7th one not supposed to be here yet? But consider this. Neither of these parts, neither of these descriptions say that those are the 7 in order. Neither of them say that the 5 of whom who fell, the 1 who is, and the other has not yet come are like in order, the first 5, then the 6th, then the 7th. And if we're keeping the idea of the Nero Redivivus myth in our mind, then it would stand that it's trying to get at him being the one who is coming out of the abyss, that he's coming back to life, Nero Redivivus. We know for a fact, historically, that Nero did not actually rise from the dead. It was an imposter. But that is what it appeared to be. That is what it appeared to be. And if you haven't caught on to it yet, John wrote down everything as he saw it. He saw it like this. It's what it appeared to be. So I think it stands to reason that we're operating on what things appear like. Alternatively, your count of these 7 Caesars could start at Tiberius instead. Tiberius was the Caesar in power during Jesus's lifetime and at Jesus's death, making the order then be Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, then Nero. Skip the year of the 4 emperors. If you know history, you know what I'm talking about because they were fake. You get Vespasian and Titus and then Domitian. So there you have your 7, again, ending with Domitian and also still including Nero. And then Nero being the one who comes and is there for only a little while. And I believe, yes, here we go. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7th. So if Domitian is our 7th, and this Nero impersonator is the 8th, well, he's an 8th, but he also belongs to the 7th, because the idea is, oh, it's actually Nero. It's just reinforcing that idea that what we're dealing with here was the common belief at the time that Nero was coming back. Whether they're believing that he actually is coming back from the dead, or like the Sibylline Oracle said, that he never actually died, like he escaped. He ran away to Parthia and he was going to Parthia is Persia, by the way. He ran away there and he was going to amass a following and he was going to come back and retake the throne. We know that in 96 AD, 1 year after Revelation was written, the Parthian Nero impersonator pops up. He amasses a following. He causes a bunch of civil unrest in the Eastern Empire, because that's like right where Persia is relative to Rome. They're in the East. And then shortly after that starts, there are just like mass riots in the Eastern Empire before this guy was finally killed. So it's all kind of matching up with what we know happened. There was this impersonator, he caused a lot of unrest, and that unrest ignited into riots, full-blown revolts. We also have the detail that this beast has 10 horns, and the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings. Of course, that they're not the same kings as the 7 heads that are the 7 kings, but they are 10 horns, are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they will receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. However, these kings have it in their mind. God puts it in their mind. You see here, God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose and to do this one purpose. God puts it in their minds to, one, hand over their authority to the beast, two, fight the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. He is the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. Also, those with him are called, chosen, and faithful. And three, here on the last slide again, they will turn on the woman. They will turn on the prostitute and make her desolate. They will betray her. They will attack her. They will make her desolate and naked. They'll devour her flesh and they'll burn her up with fire. They are going to attack her. And this, again, all maps pretty well onto what we know happened in the time following when John wrote Revelation. And we're not talking hundreds of years in the future from that point. We're not even talking 100 years in the future. We're talking 20 years. We're talking 20 years after he wrote Revelation. The stuff he describes here happens. During Emperor Trajan's campaign into Parthia, because they were, the Parthians were squaring up and trying to intimidate Rome, and Trajan was like, no, we're just going to end you guys. He leads a campaign into Parthia, and it's going so great, but while he's in there, what do you know? There's a bunch of kings, regional rulers along the Mediterranean coast in the Eastern Empire, and they all start rebelling at the same time. It's not a conspiracy. They didn't coordinate it, but it's like this one started, and then this one was like, my neighbor's doing it, so maybe if we all do it, we could win. So they all start rebelling. A snowball effect kind of happens, and it plunges the Eastern Empire into this furious cycle of revolt and pacification. And by pacification, I mean slaughtering everyone who tried to revolt. That's the Roman way. And the long-term effects of this are that that became the primary reason why Rome, instead of being on the offensive and being expansionist like it is known for, they started to enter this holding pattern. After Domitian is the Emperor Hadrian. You might know the famous Hadrian's Wall in Britain. He erected that wall because he said, we're not expanding anymore. We're going to work on holding what we have, because Rome just could not deal with what was going on in their territories anymore. It was too much for them to handle. Now that this whole thing had happened, it weakened them significantly. So they enter this holding pattern where they're not expanding anymore. They're on the defensive now. And then eventually this results in them losing territory. They start shrinking, and they shrink and they shrink and they shrink until they get so weak that roving bands of barbarians can make it all the way into Rome and sack the city itself, and they collapse. So historians can cite many, many reasons for, like, why did Rome collapse? But what it boils down to is this, at this critical juncture, they had the opportunity to defeat their long-standing rival and take everything. And then at that moment, all of these kings in the eastern provinces decided to rebel. And Rome, the emperor had to like go deal with that. And also, he died while he was dealing with that. Not in battle, he just got sick and died. Um, and the empire never recovered. It never recovered from that moment. They had to enter the holding pattern. And then they just started getting chipped away at. And eventually the empire collapsed in around the 400s or 500s. In plunging Europe into what is called the Dark Ages or the medieval era. Um, all because of that moment, which I think is huge because the next chapter 18, is going to talk about the fall of Babylon. Babylon the Great has fallen, and heaven rejoices, and the earth laments because the best thing in the world for them was the commerce that they got from Babylon or Rome, and now it's gone. And it's like, this is what caused it. And you can map it onto actual historical events, and it makes sense. It didn't cause it like right away, but it is what caused it. And I think that was very significant. So next week, we're going to get into chapter 18, the fall of Babylon the Great. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, the angel proclaims. But until then, thank you for listening if you made it this far with me. And I hope that you will tune in for the next one. Bye-bye.